to episode 45 of the David Binkowski podcast. Today, we're back talking NBA and NBA Cup, but before we get into that, I'm joined today by the co-owner of the Fallout Theater in Austin, Texas, singer of La Snacks, and Houston Rockets fan, Robert Segovia. You might know him as Bobby Segs on BlueSky. Let's welcome into the podcast, Bobby Segs. How's it going, man?
Pretty good. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing well. Thanks for jumping on. We got the NBA Cup that starts tonight, and we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I do want to talk about your Houston Rockets, because this is a team that, again, a team like my Pistons, we're going to rebuild, and we're going to go through phases of rebuild. But lo and behold, they're not in a rebuild at this point. They're number 3 in the Western Conference. That's much more than a rebuild, where my Pistons are sitting in the 10th spot, I believe, or 11th spot. So they were able to accelerate that. And I want to talk to you about the Houston Rockets and kind of how they got to where they're at now, and then we talk about their season after that.
Yeah, I mean, the quick story is just, James Harden asked out. I have been a Houston Rockets fan since the late 80s, and really, we've never really been bad. I think we had a couple of seasons where we're like the 9th seed, but I jumped in with Olajuwon basically in the middle of his career, and that went great. And then even the Stevie franchise, Coutinho Mobley years, we were still hanging around 6, 7, 8. We were a frisky, fun team, And then Yao and Tracy McGrady again, and then the Harden years. I mean, we had maybe a year break from that where we were still our bad team had Kyle Lowry and Drago, the Dragon, when he was young. And we had and I think we were a 9th seed, but we had won 46 games or 48 games. I mean, really the bad seasons. And then Harden leaves, and our best players, we had I called them the Wow. So it was Wood, Oladipo, and Wall. And that was just that was before the 2021 draft. That was 2020. And that was just a painful season. So then we drafted Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün. And I mean, the real story is just, the reason there's 2 reasons, right? We got vets, a year ago. And the other part is Alperen Şengün is, depending on the advanced metric you look at, he's either a top 10 player or a top 20 player. So yeah. You can't fake the funk on that. There's a lot of things. It's I had to, when I was over on Rockets Twitter, people did not want to have this guy be the guy. They wanted anybody else to be the guy. They wanted Jalen Green to be the guy. They wanted Jabari Smith to be the guy. They want Amen Thompson. As soon as these guys are out on Jalen Green, they're like, oh, well, Amen Thompson will be better than Şengün. They do not want Alperen Şengün to be the guy, but he just is the guy. I was talking to somebody else, and I'm like, at a certain point, they're going to say that this guy was the best guy in the 21 draft. And I only say that because besides year 1, year 2, the 2 best players in the 21 draft were him and Evan Mobley. Year 3, the 2 best players in the 21 draft were him and Scotty Barnes. Year 4, the 2 best players so far in the draft, and unfortunately Franz got hurt, but it was Franz and Şengün. So the guy is 1 or 2 every year, and it's I don't, so that's a big part of it. Jalen Green, of course, we could go through how disappointing and weird he is. The dude just scored 31 points last game, and against Sacramento, he scored maybe even 38 points. But then literally all the game, besides the first 5, literally all the games he was just garbage. There's no other way to say it. And then the next year, so we were horrible. Next year we got Tari, we got Jabari again. We somehow draft the guy later in the draft that's better than the guy we drafted at the beginning of the draft. I will say Jabari's been a little bit less disappointing for me because I was never in on Jabari. The worst part of that draft was when Orlando did the okey doke on us and was like, oh no, we're actually drafting Paolo, because I was just I didn't understand. No offense to Jabari. He's kind of the exact player I thought he would be coming out of the draft. He's a good starter. He will be, I think, at some point, but I never got the Paulo Chet conversations, and I never thought he was in there. In my, when we're doing draft stuff, my things are can you pass? Can you shoot? Can you dribble? And the shooting one, the middle one, is one you can teach. And so the reason that a Cade Cunningham, you're hopeful about a Cade Cunningham is the playmaking. You know, like he can create for other people. He can create for himself. Jabari can't do that. That's just not who he is. You know, like it's not his fault. He's a good kid. He works hard. But yeah, actually had Jaden Ivey above Jabari Smith on my draft boards. I had him third. So I thought Jabari was more in the realm of the Keegan, the sort of role player guys.
Role player,
yeah.
Shot creation is underrated. To me, look at the Celtics. Everyone on the Celtics can shot create for the most part, right? So like, let's talk about like the 15th man, right? But the top 10 guys can all shot create.
Yeah, I mean, Şengün's been better on defense this year, like a lot better. But he was always better than people think he was. Yeah. But people would say that to me. They would be like, "Well, he's never, centers on defense. You need that." And I'm like, actually, go look at who won the championship. A lot of those centers weren't good at defense. Like they just weren't. Mm-hmm. So that's like, to me, like, you talk about myths. It's like, if you're have that much talent on offense, you can get the guys on defense you can get the shooters and the guys on defense. Those guys are available every summer, everything. Yeah. So, and then just moving on, Amen, and who did we get? We always get two guys. Oh, Cam. I forgot about Cam because he's in the freaking G League. And then we get to Reed Shepherd. And yeah, we got Fred. We got Dillon Brooks. I know Memphis fans hate Dillon Brooks or they have this weird relationship with Dillon Brooks. But man, that dude, honestly, Fred's a better player, like a better day-by-day player. But Dillon Brooks changed the whole culture from a culture where people didn't want to come to Houston because the Silas era, because it was just like a wreck. And I think Ime Udoka, Fred, and Dillon Brooks just changed that to a culture of accountability where these guys, even if like Jabari and Jalen, they're kind of disappointed on offense, everybody plays defense. There really aren't. It was funny because Reed Shepherd's had a pretty disappointing rookie campaign, and people are like, well, Ime is not playing him because of defense. And I'm like, man, his defense is way better than his offense. Jesus. I mean, like, how bad, but if this were like, if, Reed's a rookie, like if Reed was like, because Amen Thompson's, everybody loves Amen Thompson, but man, his offense last year, hot garbage. Like you could just burn it in the thing. But he was just elite. He just came out elite on defense, right? It's like, but Ime does not care if you're hot garbage on offense. Like he will, like everybody's like, Ime must hate this guy. He benches guys. He does these weird rotations. And I'm like, it's defense. It's always defense. Like the dude does not, like you could go 0 for 10 and not at the side of a barn. You miss one rotation, you're on the bench, you're sitting next to him, he's yelling at you. So that's our team. Yeah. Like as we can come to the present day, it's like our team is a tough team that really only has one guy on offense that you can count on every game, and that's Şengün. Even if he's not scoring, he's playmaking. The other guys are trick or treat on offense. I mean, like Fred is probably the second best player, but he's a small guard, and sometimes Fred is playing great. Sometimes he's got 38, against Oklahoma City, and sometimes he's 1 for 7, and he looks like he's 1,000 years old. Dillon Brooks is who he is. I think they use him really well in the offense. He's a good. The real thing about Dillon Brooks that unlocked him on sort of being a good player is just like, I guess Ime or some of the coaching staff just yelled at him and say, "Hey, dude, catch and shoot threes, amazing. You're an amazing player. You dribble the ball one time, you were the worst shooter in the history." And Dillon Brooks just doesn't take those. In Memphis, he would try to dribble around and do that stuff. I don't know what they said to him, but he only takes catch and shoot threes. And if that guy is putting on the deck, he's going to the hole. So like whatever miracle they worked on him. And so that's why he's a positive player. The arguments in the Rockets fan base now are really strictly like, should Jalen and Jabari be starting and should Amen and Tari be starting over them? By the metrics, yes. The answer is yes. So like clearly, like we're talking about two guys who've been. I mean, Tari's been a top 50 player, and Amen probably by the advanced metrics top 80, and God love him, Jabari is like 120, and Jalen is like, I don't even want to talk about where Jalen is on this thing. He's lucky that Reed Shepherd and Steven Adams are on the team because it's not great. So so that's the thing. I think go ahead.
Yeah, I saw you mention that about some of the players you just mentioned. I think there's definitely a thing that I've seen when the Pistons played Houston. The defense was the number one thing that stood out for me. Was that even if Fred had a Fred game, not the good Fred, but the bad Fred game, And that's what kept Pistons in it. We literally say, like, let him keep shooting. Like, he's not even close today, but they kept getting stops. And that's the part that offense to me comes and goes. Not every team can be the Celtics and have that level of talent where we're just going to shoot 53s a game and we'll make more than you. Not everybody can do that. But a team that will play good team defense and lock in. And the thing that you hit on with Ime and with Dylan in particular, when you know your role, and this is the thing I alluded to my last podcast, I talked about the Pistons and why I like JB Bickerstaff, because he told the guys, look, your job is not to go work on your bag in the middle of the season. Your job is to look at the analytics and know what you can and can't do and stick to the things you're good at. And that's the same thing with Ime, is telling Brooks, hey, if you put the ball on the floor and you go up and shoot it, your ass is on the bench. That level of accountability, I actually wanted the Pistons to go after Ime, instead of Monty Williams, because we lost an entire season. Yeah. We lost an entire season with Monty Williams, where these guys were just out there floundering and failing, obviously. But to your point, I think it is a good to do that and tell a player, look, these are the things you're good at, do those, and then lock in on defense, and we should be okay. And just like I said, the rise of that team, and to your point with Şengün, I'm a huge I'm a fan of his, but I'm a big believer in the center who can create for others. And usually it's through passing, right? They're not going to put the ball between their legs, all that stuff. But when he gets the ball, he sees the floor. It's very Jokic-like, where he sees the floor and is like, oh, that guy's cutting. Here you go. Boom. I don't care if I get the assist or the basket. You've got it. But he also has enough bag where he can just go to the rim, do a nice post move, pull up and shoot. Like, he's got a nice game to him.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, the book on the Rockets is that we have a negative offense, but we actually have a slight positive offense. I'm not going to say it's great, but I was like looking at it. They're the 5 teams that are top 10 in both, which are like Memphis, OKC, Celtics, the teams, Cleveland. I'm missing one, and then they're like, well, who has positive on both? They're not top 5, but they're just positive. And it was a small list. It's like literally Golden State and the Rockets are really high end defensive teams and slightly positive on offense. And then I think Miami is positive on defense. Or it's positive on offense and only slightly positive on defense, which is weird for Miami. It seems the opposite, but that's it. But so we're talking about 8 teams that are positive on both ends. It's not a lot of teams. And I think with the Rockets, the key to unlock the Rockets, if the Rockets I think Dylan Brooks does the best job of this on our whole entire team. But if the Rockets team viewed Şengün like the Warriors viewed Curry, so Fred will just go try to, like you said, we'll just start missing shots, and he doesn't care. He's like, I'm the alpha. Jalen Green does that, Even Amen Thompson does that. And you're like, guy, they figured out that you can only make layups. Like, it's time to stop, And I think the next step for the Rockets is just like those guys realizing, and they did, in the games we won. I mean, we had a really great win against Minnesota. We had an overtime win against Philly. We had a win against Oklahoma City. The common denominator in that is that we just went to Şengün. And the thing about Şengün is, like, he'll get you a good shot. Like, it might not be him shooting, but like you said, he can pass. It's insane. He only has 5 or 6 assists. That's not for lack of wide open looks. That's because we're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams that God ever created. It's just like how many open just wide open looks at the end of the game that Şengün gets these guys and they just brick it. It's just like a big brick. So I think for the Rockets, it's just like that pecking order is. It's starting to come. But there's a couple of guys that are like, there's the reality of it. So I think the cup is kind of big for our team, just confidence. I think it's interesting in the West, and I know we're going to talk about it more later, but like, it is a very Warriors are our big brother, I mean, I'm sure there was a time during the Yal McGrady era where we actually beat that effing team, but like we can't even. Steph Curry is out and the Warriors beat us. It doesn't matter. Kevon Looney is like in my nightmare dreams. So I think it's a big thing of us taking like the next step, and the only way we're going to do that is if we realize that pecking order. I think that pecking order is super important, and it's like it's Şengün. Like, I don't know what to say. Like you can't. The numbers don't lie. It's not like these guys are close. It's like he's our guy. And the Rockets' problem long term is not that they don't have a guy, which is like the national media. That's what they talk about. Is, well, they don't really have a guy, so how are they winning? It's like you don't watch Rockets games. They don't have the other guy. They're not like Oklahoma City and they have 3 guys, and they're not like it's weird, the Warriors and the Rockets, because even though Curry's very old and Şengün's only 22, very similar teams, like deep teams, a lot of defensive mindset, but they only have one guy, that you can count on. And so that's why it's super interesting. It's like a lot of these other teams we'll talk about in cup play, even a team like the Hawks who have their own various problems, they still have 2 guys. They still have 2 guys that you can kind of offensively go to. And that's, I think, the biggest Rockets' Achilles heel is like, if we're not working our asses off, like we didn't during the Golden State game, that was probably our weakest. That in the first game against Charlotte. If we're not 110, 20% like effort level, it's going to be tough for us to beat the better teams or even the worst and even the bad teams.
Well, and you mentioned the depth and the lack of a number 2. So the big talk is what could they do at the trade deadline? Which team is going to have someone available potentially for this season, or do you think it's a punt to next year where they do something in the offseason or kind of play this one out and see how the year goes?
Yeah, I think Jalen Green is really hard to trade this year. I listened to the Windhorse podcast, and they just talked about how like everybody's hard to. There's like 10 teams that can actually trade because of the really arcane rules that the NBA put in place. So I think a lot of fans are going to be disappointed, and they're like, "Oh, my team is the same." Like Lakers fans, I think, are in for a very rude awakening. They can't do the weird trade they always do. But yeah, I think it is a summer. I think that this front office wants to see it, and I totally get that. I mean, if you have a team that's like, we're probably 3rd in the West right now, tied for 2nd in the West.
Third,
it's just like, I think we're going to win a lot of regular season games. I think that people are predicting what the playoffs will go for us. I mean, I don't want to get too nerdy, but I could go through the what teams we would be good against and what teams we wouldn't be. But I think the front office just wants to see it, Yeah. And I think that somebody like Jalen Green becomes a lot easier to trade over the summer. Jabari Smith is really interesting because that was the other thing that people were like, well, the Rockets are going to have to pay everybody the max and they're going to be screwed. It's like, I would just whisper, I'm like, Şengün didn't even get it. They played hardball with Şengün, and Şengün didn't even get the like rookie max extension, which is insane. Some of the guys that got it didn't get it. So I guess kudos to the front office somehow pulling that off. But like, Jalen didn't get it. Honestly, the only guy of those guys, unless God preserve us, Reed Shepherd just becomes a different player than the one I'm seeing right now. I thought he was going to be great. I mean, I thought him and Steven Castle were the 2 best players in the draft. So I take a big L on that one. And he
had a great preseason, right? Like he started. I mean, every indication was that he was going to be like there were conversations like, is he going to crack the starting rotation? That's how well he was playing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for Reed, like he is a rookie. I think he's really meek. I think if you ask Rockets fan for a word to describe Reed Shepherd, it's like there have been a couple of games, but he's also under Ime. So Ime, it's so funny to think about Amen, Cam, and Reed under the Ime regime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the like Şengün and Jalen. Şengün honestly was the only one that Silas ever held accountable. Like Jalen and Jabari and Tari just it didn't matter how they played. Like they were just going to get to play. So you can can feel sorry for the kid because I think under another coach who didn't care, I think some of this confidence stuff would go away and his natural skills would kind of come to the floor. But I hear folks talking about Minnesota fans talking about Rob Dillingham and how just small he is, and that's what you notice about Reed Shepherd. You're like, this guy is small. Like it has the rest of it has to be really good for this to make sense. And I think again, weirdly, defensively, I think he's fine. He's just a rookie. I'm not that worried about it. Weirdly, but I do think offensively. Everybody plays better with Şengün. They've put him in Şengün minutes and he's played a little better. But that's not what we were kind of sold, right? What we were sold is this guy could just do it by himself a little bit. And so again, I think he can play make. I think there's some spots he can get to. I think the shooting will get better. But it's hard for me to see the hype from here. Like it's hard for me to like go, oh, he's going to be that next Steph. Yeah, the analytics next Steph or whatever the hell they were saying, right? But it doesn't mean he can't be a good player. It doesn't mean he can't be a good rotation player. But my point is just sort of, except for Amen, none of these other guys are getting, max contracts. So I don't think the Rockets have to worry about that in the way that the Oklahoma City Thunder have to worry about that. So I think, it'll be interesting. I know the coaching staff likes these guys. I mean, I think what's weird about this team is there's not a guy, going through the Kevin Porter Jr. experience who's an awful guy. Like, I think these guys, even if they're not sort of succeeding on whatever level that we want them to succeed on, you can't, most of the guys, you can't kind of question that they're trying. They're trying to do the best, like, I don't know that it's a skill thing, or I don't know if it's a will thing. I think it unfortunately with some of these guys, it's just like they're going to be rotation players. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think if the right shooting guard became available, that Jalen Green and Jabari Smith would be available and those draft picks would be available. These guys that run the front office are smarter than me. They can look at the exact same advanced numbers that I do. And again, you got, a Manentari who could probably be a second or third guy on a team. I think there's limitations to both guys being the number one. You got Şengün, who's either a 1 or a 2, and you need that other guy. And maybe that's just a Manentari. Maybe like if we do this, Dylan Brooks goes off into the sunset in a couple of years, and we just have a Manentari at the 3 and 4, and we have Şengün at the 5, and we're just trying. I think the guards are the real question. Like, what do we do? Like, we don't like Jalen Green is not consistent enough to be a starter in the NBA, and he hasn't been consistent enough to be that for 4 years. And for Van Vliet, he is his age. He's a really, really good player. I mean, the advanced metrics love him, but like he's probably going to wear down way before Dylan Brooks wears down. And if Reed Sheppard isn't that answer, if it isn't that, if Reed Sheppard doesn't bloom up, who are the Rockets guards? And so like that to me is like the general question is like, yeah, you can get one of those guys to be a role player, either the point guard or the shooting guard, but you need the other guy to be a guy. You need the other guy to be an actual guy. And so it's kind of funny because it's like the inverse of the Pistons, right? It's like you feel really good about Cade and Ivy, but you're like, well, what's the rest of this going to be? Like what are we doing with the rest of this stuff? So I think the Rockets are kind of like sort of the inverse of that is like we have Fred who's a big Band-Aid on a lot of these issues, right? Our guard rotation. But, so short term, it's like, I think for the trade deadline short term is more like, will Steven Adams – I mean, I'm not that disappointed. The Rockets fans are really disappointed in Steven Adams, but he had an Achilles injury. Like, I've never seen a guy in the year come back from an Achilles injury just be this – not that he's ever going to be the Steven Adams of Memphis, but I think he will be better. And we've kind of seen that as the season goes along just because that injury, you don't ramp all the way right when you start playing, right? So I'm not as worried about backup centers I think some Rockets fans are. I am sort of worried about when we go to that bench, if the starters don't have it, where's the shooting coming from? We have we really just literally have, again, for all of Amen Thompson's charms, shooting is not one of them, right? Reed Sheppard, I don't know. We've been playing Aaron Holiday because Aaron Holiday can shoot, just straight out. Like the dude can shoot, right? And he'll probably get more minutes for that straight reason. So for the Rockets, to me, it's like a question of like the bench is great for defense. It's great for running. It's great for going to the basket. It's great for rebounding. When you need a three, there was one game that we lost that I forget what the game was. It wasn't a good team. I'm trying to remember what the game was, but they just hit a three-pointer. It might have been the Spurs when we lost to the Spurs. The Spurs are just not a good team. And but they hit a three-pointer in this like key part of the game. And I was like, we're not coming back from that. Like if we're taking 2-pointers, we're going to stop you at some point and we're going to win the game, But it's like counting on us to hit a last-second three to tie the game or just, we need the three. that's when it gets a little tricky for the Rockets. And so that's the biggest area of need for me is like, when Dylan Brooks and Tari Eason are, and God love them, and then Fred's had a bad year shooting, but right now I think I'll look at it again, but I think Tari and Dylan are the best 3-point shooters, and they're at like 37 maybe or 38 or something like that. It's like those guys are not – they're good shooters. They're good NBA level shooters, but those shouldn't be your best shooters. Those shouldn't be the guys that you're like, this is the guy, right? So that's my major concern for the Rockets going forward.
Yeah. The Pistons are fortunate. They kind of did like build by need and then see what you have as well. To your point, can Cade and Ivy work together? They can, but getting a Beasley, and Hardaway Jr. has been disappointing. But he started off the year well until he got concussed. He was playing well.
Yeah.
The shots haven't been falling since he got hit in the head. But they're kind of in that same position, in the reverse position, I should say, where they're looking at the 4 and 5. And you got Tobias, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, Paul Reed. They'll play Fontecchio a little at the 4, but like they're still trying to figure that out on that side of it. But they kind of feel good about the top part. It's almost like if we could swap a few players. I'm not that we would never give up Malik Beasley because we got him on a great contract. It's only a 1-year deal, so maybe that's an answer for you guys if you want to pay more for him in the offseason. But like, he's been an absolute sniper for Detroit, and that's one thing Cade has never had till this year is that spacing. So everyone could just gang up on him, clog the lane, and they knew if they kicked it out to Asar Thompson or they kicked it out to Killian Hayes or whoever the hell was on the roster last year that couldn't make a 3, it was going to be a brick and we're running away. It's funny seeing these problems with these rosters. They're just incomplete rosters is what they are. And I think both teams are in that position trying to figure out what you have. Like, what do we really have here? Given the audition, and to your point, it's like they got it. They have to change the way that this apron and the cap situation all works. It has to change because there's going to be no movement whatsoever. And so if you're a team who's out of it and you're hamstrung, let's say, by the apron, why would someone come to your games at this point? If you're a team who has no flexibility, no nothing, like the Lakers are stuck. For the most part, they're stuck. They have no assets to trade. Their players aren't that good. They're stuck. I can't imagine that they're looking at that saying, we want more teams where the fans just don't want to come to the last half or third of the season to show up to games.
Yeah, I embarrassingly have not seen LeBron James live and have decided to make this season. And so I have tickets to January 5th game, and I'm just like, guys, just keep it together for I need 2 more weeks, right? Could we just go on like a little mini winning streak so we just don't totally implode? The one time in my whole entire life that I've rooted for the Lakers to actually be halfway decent. I think it's like, it's an incredible. It's so funny when you like people in power like this, and you're like, the trade deadline is one of your most popular things. Like it's people like that. You should make that easier, not harder. It's just like it really like sometimes you feel like it's like they're just staring at the tree and the forest is on fire above them, and they just can't get out of the tree. But
it feels like this the viewership thing too. They're like, why aren't more people watching our games? And it's like, well, they're on 4 different channels, so you have to have 4 subscriptions to watch them. Whereas the NFL, I know every week on national TV, there's going to be games every Sunday. On Monday and Thursday, and like you're making it more accessible, not less. And the NBA is like, we can't figure this one out. I'm like, this is not a hard equation.
Well, I mean, I just know this because I was at a party and talking to an Oklahoma City fan, but like the Lakers have a Christmas Day game and Oklahoma City doesn't. In my entire life, you can replace Oklahoma City, like exciting young team from a small market, and replace the words Lakers with Knicks. And like, that's been the case my entire life, right? Is that one of those 2 franchises is putrid and you don't really want to watch them. And there's another franchise that is fun and exciting and you don't showcase them because you have to have your spot for one of those 2 franchises. So like, I think it's like, to me, it's like, I think it was Oklahoma City, Dallas or Oklahoma City, Memphis or maybe it was because we were talking about, or maybe it was Minnesota and Memphis. Because, you know, you hear on these things, it's like, well, who's the next American star? Who's the next American star? They're in Memphis and Minnesota. Like they are there. The two guys that people want to see that are everywhere, that are in Instagram and all those places are on those teams. Put them on ESPN, put them on TNT. Those are the guys who should have a ton of games. And it's like, if those games aren't there, then you can't complain about American basketball. I don't know why that changed, because I will say even with Oklahoma City, that Durant, Westbrook, Harden team, they at least put it on air. They would put those teams on air. I don't know why that market somehow that got on air and these teams aren't. I mean, you know, so I think it's a little bit of that too. It's like nobody wants to watch the 80 LeBron Lakers right now. Like they don't, you know, and it's like, but that Memphis team, you watch that Memphis team, it's fun to watch. I watched the Memphis Cleveland game and I was like, man, this Memphis team, or maybe it was Memphis Celtics, and I was just like, man, this is good to watch. And I think I was watching it on League Pass because they didn't put it on national TV. There's a lot. I mean, this is a hobby horse for me, because it's also like I like, you know, we're aging, right? And it's like I watch the Premier League. It's all in the morning. It's perfect. By the time my significant other realizes that I'm watching sports, they're already done. Like I've already watched Liverpool. We're good. The NBA, I've got to be like, honey, I know, because we have a small house and we have one TV. I have to be like, I either watch it on my little computer, or to be like, I know it's 8:00 on a Sunday, but can we watch the Rockets? You know, it's like, you know, so it becomes that. And it's just because the NBA is afraid to compete with the NFL. But the NFL has those times for a reason, right? I want to watch games at noon. I want to watch games at 2:00 on Saturday and Sunday, 4 p.m. And, you know, we have these Eastern games that are like, you know, I mean, if I'm watching a West Coast game at 9 p.m., that means the East Coast, that start time is 10 p.m. I mean,
and for me, it's 11. Yeah, it's even worse. I'm on Atlantic time, so I'm like, I don't watch West Coast games once the clock changes. It's impossible. I'm not staying until 2 in the morning to watch a regular season game. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, we got a British fan on BlueSky of the Rockets, Rob Dover, and that dude is not watching. I mean, a shout out to him. It's great. The stuff he does is great, but he wakes up in the morning and he's like, okay, I'm not going at 3 in the morning to watch these games, and everybody's the same. You know, like that's not a thing. So, you know, I think there's a lot of things they can change. Stop worrying about the NFL. Just put the games in the times. There are people like me who literally don't listen to podcasts that talk about the NFL. I will be there. I will watch. I'm a sicko. So, but hobby horse. I think the ratings. I think the trade stuff. So just to get back to that, I think it's like, I think the Rockets will try to trade for either shooting or that. And like, with the Pistons, I think, I don't know. How's their rookie doing? I'm just like very curious. Like how's Holland doing generally?
He looks like a rookie. You know, he shows flashes. He's an athlete. He's a competitor, and his offensive game is very limited. He'll have a game where he hits a couple threes and then misses everything. When the season started, he was very much, and you'll still see him do this, wide open for three. They're backed off him because they know he can't shoot well. And credit Fred Vinson. He's one of the guys that Fred Vinson, our shooting coach, works with, but like he's only 19. So this kid gets the ball. He'll have 7 feet of space and put it on the floor and drive to the rim and get blocked, or try to make a play at the rim. And it's like there's 3 people waiting for you because they know you're not going to shoot it. Defensively, he's made some really awesome plays. There were, you know, even the game, I believe it was the ball game where he missed the free throws. There, he was the one that went up for a reverse dunk at the buzzer to try to win the game. Then missed both the free throws. They went to overtime and lost to the Bucks. He's had some moments where he like shows those flashes where you're like, okay, this kid can play. Then offensively, he's not a shot creator. He's not a knockdown shooter. So what are you? Actually, Asar Thompson is a way better like shot creator. Well, no, but he's at least a shot creator. Asar can put the ball on the floor. You know, he was a point guard overtime elite, so he can at least put the ball on the floor, find guys in the corner. Like he would actually, once he's back into like condition to play more, I'd love to see Detroit use him as their backup point guard and then the on-ball defender, because that's the other thing we're missing. Whereas Holland, he's like the Asar light from that standpoint. Like, he's good, but like he's not that level yet.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I've always been traditionally like I had Cade third in that draft. I had Mobley and then Jalen and then Cade. And traditionally, I'm always sort of like tall point guard. I'm very wary of that term, because I've just seen enough like Dante Exums come down the pipe that I'm just like, I don't know, tall point guard. I don't know. Are you really? But I do think, I will say with the Rockets, with the men, and Asar obviously in the men are similar, maybe not identical, but like, Ime plays him everywhere. Like, Ime plays him. If he needs a small ball center, Ime will play him there. Power forward, he gets played a lot at power forward, but he gets to play a lot at point guard. It's weird. It's with Amen, it seems like he's either playing the point guard or he's playing the power forward, depending on where Ime thinks, where it should be. Like, if he needs a little ball handling off the bench, and Jalen and Fred aren't in the game, he uses him at that position. So I think with an Asur, they're both. I mean, you look at their advance and defense. It's just like, it's funny because when you get in these conversations, Tari's that level too. It's like, a guy like Holland might be nice and make some good defensive plays, but those guys are like, it's very small tier.
There's a gap that's there for sure. Yeah. That's like I said, I'm interested to see. We also have Clintman on the roster who hasn't played yet. He was our other pick from this last season. He's got a calf injury, and he's like a stretch 5. So to have someone who can shoot the 3, that's one of the things that, like, Duren has not been the playmaker that he has shown in the past, and it almost feels mental where he doesn't get the touches. And I play center, so I know how this feels to run up and down the court, to get the defensive rebound, outlet the ball, run down, and never touch it. It's deflating, especially after 5, 6, 7 trips down the floor. So you have to get him engaged in the game, and it feels like when he's not, he's just useless out there. He's not great defensively when he's not engaged. He's terrible, actually. And then offensively, he's got his turnovers are high. And, you'll see the flashes. Put the ball on the floor and take whoever off the dribble and finish off the top of the glass. And you're like, wow, where'd that come from? But like, where is that the rest of the game? Where's that intensity? And so Pistons fans are waiting to see, is Clintman going to get minutes? And if so, Stewart's a great backup 5 for us right now. He brings energy, intensity, blocks, all that stuff, defense. And he's working on defining his role as being the role guy or just stepping out and shooting a 3 once in a while. So it'll be interesting to see how it unwinds for the Pistons, because like, if I'm Duren's agent, I have a real hard time making a call for a big contract. His stats are worse than last year, and they really are. So it's hard to make that. That's like I said, the 4-5. Once Detroit can solve that, and I know Pistons fans have shit on Tobias Harris because his shooting hasn't been as good, but he's picked up recently. But he's been really good defensively.
There's just a level. Yeah, I mean. I think fans that watch
guys come at him the post, they turn, he smacks the ball every time, boom, they're off running the other way. So he's done a pretty solid job as a 4, even if he's not maybe the right size or whatever you're looking for at a 4.
Yeah, I think we go through when Dylan Brooks, he's been better this year offensively, but there would be dry spells for him because he's just not an elite offensive player. He's a role player. And fans would turn on Dylan Brooks, and I'd be like, you got to watch the games. Because this guy is, and honestly, it's funny because you get these all-star or just all defensive team or all NBA sort of shows that you hear, and it's like, I'm not as mad about the Şengün snubs or anything like that, but I do think that Dylan Brooks, because of men and Tari have been so good and they're coming off the bench, I do think he's just super underrated. It's the same sort of thing as you watch it and you're like, this guy makes everything make sense. I mean, he is on a team. The starting lineup does still have Jalen Green on it, and it still the defense still makes sense, and it's like it's because of this guy, So like, I do think that there's a level to those vets, that even if they're playing at maybe the level you don't want them to that time, that their low level is still better than some of these other guys because it's just like they know how to play basketball. They're NBA players, And
exactly.
I liked him coming out, but Yeah, I didn't notice that. I think it's like maybe it's a mental thing. I mean, I think about Speedy Claxton at the Nets. When his role diminished, he just became garbage for a while, like a whole. I felt like a whole year. He went from being one of the most underrated players to one of the most overrated players. Because if you actually watched the Nets for that whatever that year was, you were just like, this guy he's not getting touches anymore.
Claxton was a guy that I was hoping Detroit would go after when he was a free agent, but they never even got a chance to sign him. He stayed with them. So, yeah. He's the kind of role player they need. Block shots, run the floor. Yeah.
Yeah. What I was going to say is there might be some hope because it feels like Claxton has turned that around. He's okay with being whoever the guy that guy is. So maybe that's just the thing with Duren. He has to grow up a little bit and you'll get better production out of him. But
yeah, he's still really young and I'm not giving up on him, but it's like I said, you can't. When I look at what the team needs, it is definitely a backup point guard and it is definitely a starting center. Like he is not playing at a starting center. If you look at all the starting centers across the league, he has to be bottom 5. Like just being honest, just how he plays.
I'm kind of curious. Yeah, I might like that guy. He keeps doing Raptor, which is cool, and that was always honestly that's my favorite probably defensive metric is Raptor is defensive Raptor. So like I'll look at that because it clearly tells you. I'm just getting flashbacks, maybe trauma flashbacks to when people were like Şengün isn't good on defense in like the third or second, or maybe it was the second year, the last Silas year, and then I would look on Raptor, and literally Kevin Martin Jr., who was starting for us, and Jalen Green Kevin Martin Jr. was the second worst defensive starter in the whole league, and Jalen Green was like top 10 worst defensive starter, and I'm like, you don't understand. Like there's no, I don't care if, Bill Russell was playing behind these guys. Like there's no universe where these two guys, like our best defender was like, it was atrocious. So like, so it can get really, especially for a big, if they're just not holding up the end of the defense like that.
Yep. So let's get into the NBA Cup, which kicks off tonight. We've got a couple games happening tonight. I want to talk about the matchups. We'll go through each bracket and we'll pick round by round who we think is going to win and just quickly go through those. I want to start with Thunder versus Mavs. So there is, by the way, if you're on BlueSky or for NBA Threads, there is a tournament challenge. If you catch this before the games start that you can enter, just go search for that. Find me and I'll repost it on BlueSky today. You can see my handle in the description below. So first game, we're going to talk about Thunder v Mavs 1-4. Who do you like in that game and why?
I mean, that's much like even though I'm going to totally homer that pick, let's just preview. But like much like the Rockets have trouble with the Warriors, man, the Thunder have a lot of trouble with the Mavs. The Mavs to me are like, a lot of people are hot on Memphis. OKC, of course, in the West. The Mavs to me are, if I was picking today, I would pick the Mavs because I think that in a tournament like this too, just having Kyrie and Luka looks really good right now. The Mavs are the hottest team. So I'm going to go with the Mavs. I think the Mavs are going to beat Oklahoma City.
All right. I'm taking the Thunder, believe it or not. And it's only because of depth. I think that their defense is going to either playing at home and their defense is going to come out and they're going to limit all the other guys. So Luka's going to do his thing. Kyrie's probably going to do his thing. But they're going to put guys in the door chamber. They're going to have just guys flying around. I like the defense of the Thunder to pull off. And it's not an upset, the number 1 seed here, but I like the Thunder to advance. The next round we'll preview. You already kind of alluded. Rockets v Warriors. Although will Big Brother finally take the L to little brother here?
Yeah, I'm going to go totally homer on this. I'm just going to go hope for like one of those games where Steve Kerr is playing a lineup where you're like, what is Steve Kerr doing? And then the Rockets sneak this one out. I do think we've been close. I mean, we lost in overtime. We lost barely. So we're due. Homer pick.
Yep.
Teams are, like I said, I think are very similar, except one is elite rebounding team, which is the Rockets, and one is an elite three-point shooting team. So obviously it depends on what version of Buddy Hield the Warriors get that day. But I'm going to pick the Rockets. Totally homer pick.
All right. Let's flip to the other side of the bracket before we get into the next round. We have Bucks v Magic, which is tonight. Bucks against Magic playing, which, Franz is out, Paulo's out. I think we probably both agree on this one, the Bucks.
Yeah, I think it's like sadly, yeah. If the Bucks don't win this one, I mean, it's so funny because like I looked at that and I was like, man, this is just like a Doc Rivers special. Like this is like you think the Bucks are gonna win. Orlando has no players, and like somehow Orlando wins, but you got to pick the Bucks. It's just like,
Yeah,
you know.
they're on a roll too. They're another team that I was talking with Drake about this last episode. The Bucks were like everyone's writing them off. Doc Rivers has got to go. They're too old, and now they're 8-2, and they're whooping everyone's ass. And Giannis is putting up ridiculous numbers, and Dame's come around, and the role players are playing great all of a sudden. It's like, yeah, this is the team we thought we were going to get. And again, if I think Orlando was healthy, I'd probably flip this and go the other way, but they're not, and I just don't see how they're going to be able to score with them. That's just that I don't think you have enough points coming in from the Magic to be able to hang with them.
I think with the Bucks, it's like there's a lot of these teams. It's like I know some Suns fans get mad at me, but I'm like I never bought the Suns, and it's just because when you look at the Suns versus the Bucks, for example, like the Bucks team makes sense when they're healthy. Like the team makes sense. It's like, do I have a center? Do I have a power forward? Do I have like basic basketball? Do I have 3 guys off the bench? Like it's not complicated, right? And I think the Bucks, like that's why they're winning. It's not because do I believe in the higher levels when they get to Cleveland and Boston? No, but do I think that they could be a team that gets to the second round in the playoffs and plays those teams? Yeah, because you look across the East and a lot of those teams just don't make sense. Like you're just like there's something about them. There's some big flaw in the Bucks. When they're healthy, do make sense.
Yep. Next game is Knicks v Hawks. Who do you like in that one?
This may just be my inner New York Knicks hater. I mean, you can't. I'm just gonna say for all Knicks fans, and I appreciate all of you, but I grew up a Rockets fan. I grew up the New York media saying Patrick Ewing was better than Hakeem Olajuwon, and then we just had to stuff him in the closet, So I hate the Knicks. I mean, I hate the Knicks. New age Rockets fans hate the Warriors, of course. Like that's the team that you hate. But I'm an old curmudgeon Rockets fan, and I hate the Knicks and the Jazz. Those are like the teams I hate, for my generation. So I'm all that preamble to say I'm picking the Hawks. I like the Hawks. I like the team. I think it's definitely a team where if they get hot, they're hot right now. They can really exploit the Knicks. And with the Hawks, it's not talent; it's all mental. It's like if they don't. But you look at that roster on the Hawks, and you're like, why isn't this team a top 4 seed? I don't get it. So, in this style, in this tournament, Trae Young in the Garden, we're going with the Hawks.
Well, I'm going to update. I updated your name there to say noted Knicks hater, but I'm going to actually do this. I actually feel the same way. I like yes, they were missing Cat, but that Knicks team, when they were playing Detroit, was getting destroyed by them. I mean, destroyed, and they give up 40-something points in a quarter. It was 39 points in a quarter to Detroit. That's supposed to be a team that hangs their head on defense, which has not happened this year. And so, if it's going to be a shootout, I like the Hawks. I like Trae Young taking over, and I'll dare Bridges, I'll dare whoever on the Knicks to make a bunch of threes against me. I'm sure Thibs will probably ride these guys 40-something minutes per game and wear them out. Yeah. But I like the Hawks too. I like Trae Young in a pressure game. We're on the same page there. So now we have Bucks versus Hawks in the next round. Who do you like there?
I think just a little bit on the Bucks though. But like I want to say, it's like because you're talking about the Knicks, it's like to my point of a team making sense, right? Somebody got in my mentions because I did these little tiers that got somehow. These making lists is popular, but like they were just like I think I had the Bucks 3rd in the East, and I had Orlando 4th, and or flipped, and I had the Knicks 5th. And Knicks fans came in my mentions and were like, we should be 3rd because of blah 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 blah. And I'm like, again, Orlando when they're healthy, the Bucks when they're healthy, those teams make sense. And I think for some other reason, we live in a bizarro universe. This is why I knew those Nets teams would never do anything because at one time they had like Dorian Finney-Smith, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. They had just like 4 small forwards. I was like, This is a team of small forwards. Like I don't know who who got this in their brain that this was going to work, but like you have to actually have rules of basketball. And what the Knicks problem is to me is like the reason that Cat worked, it's not so much he needs a center next to him, but he does need a big. He needs somebody who is as big, like can be his counterpart and protect him a little bit on defense. And you're not getting that from OG, as good as a player as he is on defense, or Mikal Bridges, who I don't know what happened to him, but they're both small forwards and like just the strictest sense of the word. And that's a team that doesn't have a power forward. And so I'm going to go for a team that has logical position basketball over that team. So that's just my little thing on the Knicks.
I don't think that so you're talking about Bucks Hawks, by the way, just real quick. You said
that was my little segue on that one.
That team makes sense. The Bucks make sense to you, which I think I agree, and the Hawks make sense. So who do you like in that matchup?
I'm going with the Hawks. I have like in my head, I have this incredibly Trae Young heater happening. I don't know why, but this is my so I'm going to go. They're going to go into Milwaukee. Doc Rivers is going to Doc Rivers it, and we are going to get Trae Young advancing to the finals in Las Vegas.
All right, and then in the other bracket, I have the Bucks going to the finals. I have the Bucks making the finals, and then in the other bracket, you have the Mavericks, I believe, playing the Thunder. Who do you like there?
Oh no, the Mavericks playing the Rockets.
I'm sorry, Mavericks playing Mavericks playing the Rockets in the
and I can only go homerism so far. So I'm going to pick the Mavericks. I just think it's like again, it's like Kyrie and Luka are like made for this tournament. Like it's made for like fourth quarter. We need to win this game. You can't outscore us. Here we go. So I'm going to pick the Mavs in that one.
I went Thunder again, and again, I'm just going based on this is a team that has not won anything. The Thunder had not won anything, and I think they're going to put some. I think they'll put some emphasis on this and actually try, and they're going to do what they do, which is play great defense. And I think defense a lot of times can win these types of games. So I have the Thunder winning there. So my final is Bucks v Thunder, and your final is Mavs versus Hawks. So I'll let you go first. So you like Mavs versus Hawks?
I just think this is going to be. I think this is where the Hawks' luck runs out, and we kind of get the same thing when we got where the Lakers were clearly the better. The Pacers' luck kind of ran out. So like I think this is. I think the Mavs are going to win it. I think Luka and Kyrie are going to hold the NBA Cup over their heads.
Yep, I have Thunder v Bucks, and I have the Bucks winning it. The tiebreaker, by the way, for this, there were two questions that were tiebreakers. So in case either one of us are right, the tiebreaker for this bracket challenge was who's your MVP, and then who's going to get the most technical fouls. So my MVP, I'll go first since mine I just answered. I have Giannis as the MVP. I think he's the most unstoppable force in this whole bracket. Of the teams who are in this, I think he's the most unstoppable force, literally. So I think he wins MVP, he puts up ridiculous numbers, and then gets that. And my technical fouls, I have Luka getting the most technical fouls because he's going to complain and argue if things don't go his way. So those are my two picks for tiebreakers.
Mine as well. Yeah, I think I do debate between Kyrie and Luka and the Mavs side of the MVP, or even Trae Young. Trae Young could get it in this scenario. I'm going to go Luka is going to win the MVP. And then I'm going to go Trae Young for the same reasons you just stated about Luka is going to get the most technical fouls.
The most technical fouls. All right. Well, Bobby, thanks for joining me today. I have one more segment here. But if you are on BlueSky, please go follow him. He's at Bobby Segs. You see it right there. Oh, now it's gone. Now it's back again. So go follow him at Bobby Segs. Obviously, you can follow me. My handle did change. I've used my own domain name finally, which is amazing. I'm glad they allow that. So it's David Pinkowski. And my final take for the day is I want to talk about one of the topics I've seen on all the conversations with podcasts and the media and all these things is how bad the Eastern Conference is. And if this team was in the East, they'd be in whatever place. Well, look, lo and behold, where we're at today. After a quarter of the season, the number one team in the NBA happens to live in the East, and they're the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Mavs run notwithstanding other teams playing well, we can make this argument really simple and boil it down to this. Last podcast, when Arturo was on, I should say, 2 podcasts ago, we were making fun of the Sixers front office. And I was talking about their lack of leadership and accountability. And he brought up a great point. He said, who leads the Sixers in minutes? And the reality is teams like the Sixers in the East aren't healthy or weren't healthy. Now that they're back together, now that they have their big three, they're kicking people's asses again. And they're rising up, and they're going to end up back in the playoffs seeding just like we all thought they would. The start of the season is not indicative of how a team finishes. And so all these narratives about this conference is better than the other, I'm not admitting that the East is better than the West. But to say that the team, no offense to Bobby here, but like the Rockets, who barely beat Detroit, who was shorthanded by 2 on the road by scoring 101-99. If that game were played today, we probably have a different outcome because Detroit's healthier. So the early season narratives about this conference, if they were over here, if they were over there, it's all going to shake out in the end. And in the end, it will regress to the mean. And you're going to probably see the West be slightly better than the East, but not that much. And at the end of the day, good basketball is good basketball. Let's try to just enjoy the season and stop with the dumb narratives. That was episode 45. Again, to Bobby for joining me. If you please rate, like, and subscribe to this podcast on all your favorite platforms and share with a friend. We'll see you in the next one.